So, the diminished seventh chord. 3 minor thirds, or 2 interweaved tritones. Now we know this chord is very ambiguous and it can go in all kinds of directions to all kinds of different places. In fact, there's a video by a guy, Jacob Collier or something, where he explains how it can resolve to 4 different keys.
It could go.
In fact, the diminished seventh chord can resolve to all 12 keys. So what I want to do in this video is explain how on earth this one single chord can resolve to all 12 keys. And then at the end, I'm going to show you a really, really wonderful example where Beethoven uses some of these resolution and reinterpretation tricks that we're going to be talking about. Okay, so the way that the chord can resolve to all 12 different keys is because it has 3 different resolution mechanisms. And in each of these 3 mechanisms, you have a choice as to 4 keys that you could possibly end up in. Turns out 3 times 4 is 12, so you get all 12 keys. So the first resolution mechanism is actually really quite simple. It only involves thinking of the diminished seventh chord as straight up a dominant. So what I mean by this is start from the chord, and you simply need to pick one of the 4 notes and lower it a semitone. So imagine that we lower this B down to B flat, and this just spells out a B flat 7 chord, which just resolves very cleanly to E flat. So let's try it with another note. So let's lower this A flat. We lower it, we've got G7, and we resolve to C. And the remaining 2 are lower it to E, resolve to A, and lower this to a D flat, resolve it to G flat. Okay, so we've ticked off 4 keys, 8 to go. Okay, so what's going on here? So I'm going to play the chord, I'm going to add the octave here. So on initial approach, this just looks like 4 minor thirds. But if you look a bit more closely, that can't actually be right, because look, you've got D, F, F, A flat, C flat, okay, still a minor third, but then C flat, D, that's an augmented second. And if we start from the top, you've got D, B, G sharp, E sharp, okay, fine, but E sharp, D is again an augmented second. So what's going on is you've got a choice as to where you put the augmented second. Like you can put it here, or here, or here, or here. And when you do make that choice, what you're left with is in that space, wherever you've put it, there's no note in between. And what that does is it determines the scale around the whole chord. So for instance, imagine that I put the augmented second, let's say, here, between here and here. That's where I'm thinking of the augmented second. So there is no note in between. And the scale that I'm left with sounds like this. We end up in C. Now imagine that I'm putting it, say, between here and here. The scale that I'm left with looks like this. And we end up in A. So because there's 4 choices as to where you put your augmented second, the interval that isn't minor third, you then end up with 4 scales, and correspondingly you end up resolving to 4 different keys. Okay, so the second resolution mechanism is a little bit more subtle. So the way that I like to think about this one is if we start from a dominant 7th chord, let's take this. There's a little like chromatic little shimmy that we can do where it's like, and if you do all of those together, you end up with, so we can reverse engineer that and start off with a diminished 7th chord and pick these 3 notes and move it up, and we get a dominant 7th chord, which resolves to a completely new key, which we hadn't seen before. But you can do that with any 3 of the 4 notes. So if we start again from the same chord, let's lift this up to there, and this up to here, and this up to here, and you end up with a completely different dominant 7th chord, which resolves to B flat. So what combinations have we got left? Let's do this up to here, and that to there, and that to there, and here. We end up in D flat. And finally, let's move this up here, and this up here, and this up here, and this is B7. So we end up in E. The third and final resolution mechanism, I like to think of this one as a kind of expansion moment on the tonic. So I'll kick this one off with an example, this big moment in Beethoven's Third Piano Concerto. Okay, so here Beethoven is using this diminished seventh chord to resolve to this cadential idea on E flat, and then eventually just resolves to E flat. But when I talk about this expansion on the tonic, what I mean is, let's take this E flat that Beethoven's had. You can just do this little shimmy like this, and like this, and on the top too like this. And if you do all of these at once, you get this expansive. So the thing that actually comes to mind is Mozart's right? And the other thing that comes to mind is actually the slow theme from Tchaikovsky's Sixth, which I will show you. So there you've got this in D major, this gorgeous. So okay, so how do we actually apply this third resolution mechanism? Well, we start from this chord that we've been working from, and here we just need to regard each of the four notes in turn as a potential tonic. So let's take this D first. I'm just going to move the G sharp to the bass, and then we just do a cadence on D. So now let's do it with F. So I'm going to move the B to the bass, and just a cadence on F. Okay, so A flat, D in the bass, and we just want a cadence in A flat. And finally, the last remaining key, we're going to go like this, put the E sharp in the bass, and we just have. Okay, so we've ticked off all 12 keys, all coming from this one single diminished seventh chord. And now, as promised, oh my god, so good example from Beethoven, where he just puts all of this together. So, we're in the major bit of the slow movement of his Seventh Symphony. We're in A major, and he's preparing this big, big modulation to C. And so he's playing around with this diminished seventh chord, and he treats it in what we've been calling the sliding up to the dominant approach, so the second resolution mechanism. So he's just hitting this E7, and then at some point he arrives at this same diminished seventh chord, but treats it this time according to the first resolution mechanism. He just says, hey, you're just a dominant, and you're a dominant of B minor, which happens to be a subdominant of just A. So we just resolve to A. But then the next time he revisits this diminished seventh chord, he's like, nah, 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 nah. Now you're a dominant of F. And here you just feel the ground shift beneath your feet. And when you hit F, that's just a subdominant of C, and we just resolve to C. So now listen to Beethoven put it all together and enjoy.